I am 26 years old, and for most of my life, I believed my role in the family was to be the stable one, the quiet one, the one who worked hard, saved her money, and never caused any trouble. My sister, Chloe, who is 2 years younger, was the opposite. She was the star, the spectacle, the one who dreamed big and expected the world to hand her those dreams on a silver platter. Our parents, Mark and Susan, were more than happy to oblige. They saw her as their masterpiece, and I was just the sensible, beige background against which she could shine. The most recent proof of this came in the form of a gala. Not a birthday party, not a graduation celebration, but a full-blown gala. Chloe had decided she wanted to be an event planner, and to launch her career, she needed a portfolio piece. What better piece than a lavish party for herself, celebrating nothing in particular other than her own ambition. My parents thought this was a brilliant idea. They saw it as an investment in her future, a way to network with the right people. So they spared no expense. They rented out a grand ballroom at a historic hotel downtown. There were crystal chandeliers, towering floral arrangements, and an open bar with top-shelf liquor. Chloe wore a custom-made gown that cost more than my first car. They hired a live jazz band. They even arranged for a fleet of limousines to ferry her and her friends around, as if they were royalty for a night. The whole affair was a shimmering, ostentatious display of wealth we did not actually have. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a familiar mix of resignation and a quiet, simmering anger. I knew who would ultimately bear the weight of this extravagance. The total cost, I later found out, was $50,000. $50,000 for a party. A party for a 24-year-old with no job and no prospects beyond her own inflated sense of self. I had spent the last 5 years scrimping and saving every penny to open my own small business, a cozy little cafe that was finally starting to turn a profit. My life savings, which I had poured into that venture, didn't even amount to $50,000. The sheer scale of their indulgence for her, compared to the quiet encouragement they offered me, was a chasm I could no longer ignore. A month after the last champagne flute was cleared away, the bills started to arrive. The fantasy evaporated, and the harsh reality of their financial recklessness set in. I knew it was coming. I had been bracing myself for it since the day they announced the gala. But even I could not have predicted the audacity of their solution. They sat me down at the dining room table, their faces grim and serious. It was the same table where we had eaten thousands of meals, the same table where I had done my homework as a child, the same table that now felt like a stage for my betrayal. My father cleared his throat, a sound I had come to associate with bad news. He never made that sound when he was about to praise Chloe. "Olivia," he began, his voice heavy with false solemnity. "Your mother and I need to talk to you about something important. It's a family matter." I waited, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I had learned long ago that showing any emotion in these situations was a sign of weakness they would exploit. The gala was a wonderful success. My mother chimed in, her voice bright and brittle. Chloe made so many valuable connections. Everyone was so impressed. It was, my father agreed, nodding, a great investment in her future. But investments require capital. And we found ourselves a bit overextended. There it was, the gentle lead-up to the inevitable demand. I remained silent, letting him spell it out. "We have some debts from the event," he continued, finally getting to the point. "Significant debts. And we need your help to clear them." I looked from his face to my mother's. They both wore expressions of strained expectation, as if they were asking me to pass the salt, not to bail them out of a $50,000 hole they had dug for Chloe. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. "Around 50,000, my father said, waving a hand dismissively as if the number were trivial. "But if we all pull together as a family, we can handle it." I felt a cold laugh bubble up in my chest, but I suppressed it. "We?" I asked. "Who is we?" I wasn't consulted about this party. I didn't agree to this expense. My mother's face hardened. "This is not about agreeing, Olivia. This is about family responsibility. We have always supported you." "Supported me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. You let me live here while I saved for my cafe, yes. But I paid rent. I bought my own groceries. I contributed to the household. My business was built with my own money and my own work. This, I said, gesturing vaguely towards the memory of the gala, is not my responsibility. My father's patience snapped. The carefully constructed facade of the concerned patriarch crumbled away, revealing the entitled man beneath. This is our house, he said, his voice rising. And as long as you live under our roof, you'll contribute to this family's needs. We need $50,000. You have a successful business. You can get a loan. You can pull it from your profits. I don't care how you do it, but you will do it. The ultimatum was clear. The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. And if I don't? I asked quietly. My mother delivered the final blow, her voice as cold as ice. Then you can find somewhere else to live. I stared at them, at the two people who were supposed to love and protect me. In that moment, I saw them for what they truly were, not parents but users. They had used my stability to fund their irresponsibility. They had used my quiet nature as an excuse to ignore my needs while indulging my sister's every whim. They had given me an ultimatum, thinking I would fold, that I would sacrifice my own hard-earned security for their comfort. A strange sense of calm washed over me. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but it was now overlaid with a layer of icy resolve. This was not just a fight about money. It was a fight for my own self-respect. All right, I said, my voice steady. I understand. I stood up from the table. I'll start packing my things. Their faces registered shock. They had expected me to argue, to cry, to plead. They had not expected me to simply agree. They had overestimated my loyalty and underestimated my breaking point. As I walked out of the room, I heard my father call after me, his voice a mixture of anger and panic. Don't be so dramatic, Olivia. We're your family. I didn't turn back. I kept walking towards my room, my mind already racing. They thought they were kicking me out. They thought they were taking away my safety net. They had no idea what I was about to do. I wasn't just getting out. I was taking my real investment with me. And in doing so, I was going to own their future, while they would be left to owe everyone. The game had changed. They just didn't know it yet. Up in my room, the four walls that had been my sanctuary for so long suddenly felt like a cage. I looked around at the life I had built within their house, a life of quiet diligence and careful planning. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, I had bought with my own money. I had been so proud of my independence, but I saw now that it was an illusion. Living under their roof meant I was always under their thumb, always subject to their whims and their blatant favoritism. The ultimatum was not a surprise, not really. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being the second choice. When Chloe wanted ballet lessons, they paid for the best instructor in the city. When I wanted to join the school's science club, they complained about the small fee for lab materials. When Chloe crashed her first car, a brand new convertible they had bought her for her 18th birthday, they replaced it without a second thought. When my old, second-hand car broke down, I took the bus for 6 months until I could afford the repairs myself. The pattern was so deeply ingrained in our family dynamic that I had almost stopped noticing it. I had accepted it as a fact of life, like gravity or the changing of the seasons. Chloe was the sun, and I was a distant planet, orbiting in her shadow. But their demand that I pay for her party, that I sacrifice my financial security for her fleeting moment of glory, was a line I would not let them cross. I pulled out a suitcase from the top of my closet and began to pack. I moved with a deliberate, methodical calm. I folded my clothes neatly, arranged my toiletries, and carefully wrapped the few sentimental items I owned. With each item I placed in the suitcase, I felt a layer of resentment and obligation sloughing off. I was not just packing my belongings. I was shedding a lifetime of being undervalued. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was my best friend, Maya. We had been friends since kindergarten, and she knew my family situation better than anyone. I had texted her a brief, frantic summary of the dinner confrontation. "Call me right now," Her text read. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. Liv, are you okay? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I'm fine, I said, and to my surprise, I found that I was. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm leaving. Good, she said, without a moment's hesitation. You should have done this years ago.
But you need to be smart about this.
They're going to try to manipulate you. They already did, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. They told me to pay $50,000 or get out. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. 50,000? Are they insane? That's not just manipulation, that's extortion. Tell me about it, I said, sitting down on the edge of my bed. But it's okay. I have a plan. Maya was a financial analyst, and her mind worked in numbers and legalities. What kind of plan? She asked, her tone shifting from concerned friend to sharp professional. You have your cafe, but that's your livelihood. You can't let them touch it. Are your business accounts separate from your personal ones? Are their names on anything? Everything is separate, I assured her. I learned that lesson a long time ago. My business is in my name only. But there's something else. Something they've forgotten about. I explained to her about the family fund. A few years ago, my father had approached me with what he called a golden opportunity. He had the chance to invest in a small commercial property, the very building where I wanted to open my cafe. He said if I contributed $20,000 from my savings, we could buy it together through a holding company he would set up. I would be a part owner and my rent payments would essentially be going back into our own investment. It seemed like a brilliant idea at the time. I would have security for my business, and we would both build equity. He called it a joint investment, I told Maya. I gave him the $20,000. He handled all the paperwork. I've been paying rent to the holding company ever since. Maya was silent for a moment. Olivia, she said slowly, I need you to find that paperwork. The agreement you signed. I want to see exactly what it says. A cold dread began to seep into my calm resolve.
Why?
Do you think something's wrong? I think your father asking you for $50,000 after spending that much on a party is a massive red flag, she said. And I think a family fund managed solely by him sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Find the paperwork.
Now.
After I hung up, I went to the small filing cabinet in the corner of my room. I kept all my important documents there. My birth certificate, my car title, my business license. And in a folder labeled Property Investment, the contract I had signed with my father. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't looked at it in years. I had trusted him. He was my father after all. I sat on my bed and read through the legal jargon, my heart sinking with every clause. Maya's suspicion had been a small seed of doubt, but now it was blooming into a full-grown tree of horror. The contract was for the formation of a limited liability company, or LLC, that owned the building. My father was listed as the managing member and I was listed as a minority partner, with my $20,000 contribution giving me a 30% stake. But then I saw the section on capital accounts. It stated that all rental income was to be deposited into the LLC's bank account and could only be used for property maintenance, taxes, and other legitimate business expenses. Any other withdrawal required the written consent of all partners. I had never given my consent for any withdrawal. My mind raced back over the past few years. The rent I had paid, faithfully every month. The small talk with my father about the investment, where he would vaguely mention how well it was doing. The complete lack of any financial statements or profit distributions he had ever provided me. He hadn't just used my initial investment. He had been pocketing my rent money. And where had it all gone? It was painfully obvious. It had gone to fund Chloe's extravagant lifestyle. The designer clothes, the international vacations, the brand new car. And, finally, the $50,000 gala. The betrayal was so much deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just that they favored Chloe. It was that they had actively stolen from me to do it. They had used my dream, my hard work, and my trust as their personal slush fund. I felt a surge of white-hot anger, so intense it made me dizzy. The calm resolve I had felt earlier was now forged into something harder, sharper. This was no longer about just leaving. This was about justice. I took a deep breath and continued reading the contract, my eyes scanning for any leverage, any loophole, any weapon I could use. And then I found it. It was a single clause, buried deep in the document, a standard provision in many partnership agreements, but one I was certain my father had either forgotten or never bothered to understand. It was the fiduciary duty clause. It stated that the managing member, my father, had a legal obligation to act in the best interest of the company and its partners. Any misuse of funds, any act of fraud or gross negligence, constituted a breach of this duty. And in the event of such a breach, the other partners had the right to initiate a buyout of the breaching partner's shares at a price determined by the book value of their initial investment, not the current market value. My father's initial investment in the LLC, according to the contract, had been a token amount of $1,000. He had structured it so that my money was the real capital, while he retained majority control. But in his arrogance, he had left himself vulnerable. He had breached his duty in the most egregious way possible. And according to the piece of paper in my hands, I had the right to buy his 70% stake in a company that owned a property now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, all for the price of his initial $1,000 investment. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. My parents had given me an ultimatum: pay their debts or get out. They thought they were cornering me, leaving me with no choice but to surrender my money. They had no idea that they had just handed me the keys to their financial ruin. I was going to get out just like they wanted, but I was going to take everything with me: the cafe, the building, the future they had stolen from me. It was all coming back. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet. My parents were likely assuming I was in my room, stewing in my own defiance, perhaps reconsidering their offer. Chloe was probably still asleep, dreaming of her next grand entrance. I got dressed, packed the last of my things into my car, and left without a word. I didn't leave a note. My silence, I decided, would be more unnerving to them than any angry outburst. My first stop was a small hotel just outside of town. I needed a neutral space, a base of operations where I could think clearly without the oppressive weight of my family's presence. After checking in, I called Maya. "I found the contract," I said, my voice steady. "And you were right. It's so much worse than I thought." I explained everything to her: the LLC, my minority stake, the stolen rent money, and the beautiful, perfect fiduciary duty clause. She listened patiently, punctuating my story with sharp intakes of breath and muttered curses directed at my father. "Liv, this is incredible," she said when I had finished. "He handed you a loaded gun. Do you realize what this means?" "I think so," I said, looking at the contract spread out on the hotel bed. "It means I can take the building." "It means you can take everything," she corrected me. "The building, the LLC, the rental income he's been hiding. You can gut him. But you have to do this right. You need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. I know a guy. His name is Mr. Harris. He specializes in business litigation. He eats guys like your dad for breakfast." I hesitated. A lawyer felt like such a serious, irreversible step. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 26 years to keep the peace, flinched at the idea of such open warfare. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Maybe I should just talk to him first. Show him the contract. Maybe he'll just agree to give me my money back." Maya's voice was firm.
No, Olivia.
"The time for talking is over. He didn't talk to you when he was draining the company account to pay for Chloe's party. He didn't talk to you when he gave you that disgusting ultimatum. He thinks you're a pushover. You need to show him and the rest of your family that you are not. You need to go in there with legal force. No more gentle requests. This is a business transaction now. A hostile takeover." She was right. I knew she was right. My father would never respond to a polite request. He would bully, he would gaslight, he would twist my words until I was the one apologizing. The only language he understood was power. And for the first time in my life, I had it. "Okay," I said, my resolve hardening once more. Give me his number. I spent the rest of the day preparing for war. I went to the bank and got statements for the LLC account. It took some doing, as I was only a minority partner, but the breach of contract clause gave me certain rights to access financial records. The statements were a bloodbath. There were huge cash withdrawals, transfers to my father's personal credit card, and payments made directly to the vendors from Chloe's gala. The hotel, the caterer, the florist. It was all there in black and white. A clear and undeniable record of his theft. I then went to my cafe. My employees were surprised to see me so early, but I told them I was just doing some inventory. In reality, I was gathering my own financial records, my profit and loss statements, my growth projections, the proof of the hard work I had poured into making the business a success. The cafe was my creation, my passion. The building was just the shell that housed it. But my father had made the mistake of thinking he owned both. By the time I met with Mr. Harris the next day, I had a binder full of evidence. He was an older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to my story without interruption, his expression unreadable. He reviewed the contract, the bank statements, and my business records, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on his polished mahogany desk. When he was done, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Your father is not a very smart man. He's arrogant and he's sloppy. That's a dangerous combination for him, but a very fortunate one for you." "So, I have a case?" I asked, my heart pounding. "You have more than a case," he said, a thin smile touching his lips. "You have a slam dunk. The breach of fiduciary duty is crystal clear. The contract is ironclad. We can enforce the buyout clause. We will send him a formal notice of breach and an offer to purchase his shares for the stipulated $1,000. He will likely refuse or ignore it. Then, we will file a lawsuit to compel the sale. A judge will take one look at these bank statements and grant our motion. The property will be yours." A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. "How long will it take?" "He'll try to drag it out," Mr. Harris said. "He'll file motions, he'll make accusations. He'll try to paint you as a greedy, ungrateful daughter. But the evidence is on our side. In the end, he will lose. And he will be forced to pay all legal fees, both his and yours." The thought of my father, so proud and so controlling, being publicly humiliated in a courtroom was a satisfying one. But I wanted this to be over quickly. I wanted to cut the ties and move on with my life. "Is there a faster way?" I asked. Mr. Harris steepled his fingers. "There is. But it requires you to be very strong. We can arrange a settlement meeting. Just us, you, your father, and his lawyer, if he has one. We present our evidence. We make our demand. We show him the lawsuit we are prepared to file. We give him two options: sign over the LLC and walk away, or face a long, expensive, and very public legal battle that he is guaranteed to lose." This was it. The confrontation. The final showdown. The idea terrified me, but it also thrilled me. It was a chance to face my father not as his daughter, but as his equal, as his adversary. "Let's do it," I said, my voice clear and firm. "Let's arrange the meeting." As I left his office, my phone rang. It was my mother. I ignored the call. A few moments later, a text message appeared. "Olivia, this has gone on long enough. Your father is very upset. You're tearing this family apart. Just come home, and we can talk about this." I typed out a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. "There is nothing to talk about. My lawyer will be in touch." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message was delivered. The first shot had been fired. There was no going back now. The next few days were a strange limbo. I stayed at the hotel, working remotely and managing the cafe by phone and email. My parents alternated between sending me angry, threatening texts and tearful, manipulative voicemails. My father accused me of being a traitor. My mother lamented how I was breaking her heart. Chloe posted a series of vague, passive-aggressive messages on social media about snakes in the family and people who forget where they came from. I ignored it all. Their words were just noise now. The only voice I was listening to was my own. Mr. Harris, true to his word, worked quickly. He drafted the formal notice of breach and the purchase offer. He sent it to my parents' house via a certified courier. The silence that followed was deafening. For 2 full days, I heard nothing from them. No angry calls, no pleading texts. It was an unnerving quiet, the calm before the storm. On the 3rd day, Mr. Harris called me. "We have a response," he said. "Not from your father, but from his lawyer. He's retained legal counsel. They've requested a meeting." My stomach did a nervous flip. "Is that good or bad?" "It's predictable," Mr. Harris said. "It means your father is scared. He's realized he's in over his head. He's hired someone to try and bully us into a smaller settlement. They'll probably offer to pay back your initial $20,000, maybe with a little interest, in exchange for you dropping the lawsuit." "I don't want the money back," I said, my voice hard. "I want the building." "I know," Mr. Harris said, a hint of approval in his tone. "And that's exactly what we're going to tell them. The meeting is set for Friday at my office. Be ready." The days leading up to the meeting were the longest of my life. I oscillated between moments of fierce determination and crippling self-doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being too harsh? The years of ingrained guilt were hard to shake. I called Maya every few hours, and she acted as my emotional anchor, reminding me of every slight, every injustice, every time they had made me feel small and insignificant. "This is not about revenge, Liv," she told me during one of our calls. "This is about self-preservation. They were willing to bankrupt you for a party. They were willing to make you homeless. They are not acting like a family. They are acting like predators. And you're finally fighting back." Her words were the steel I needed for my spine. By the time Friday morning arrived, I was no longer nervous. I was ready. I chose my outfit carefully. A simple, professional black dress.
No frills, no distractions.
I wanted to look like a businesswoman, not a daughter. I arrived at Mr. Harris's office early. He greeted me with a nod and led me to the conference room. It was a large, imposing room with a long table and a panoramic view of the city. I sat on one side, with Mr. Harris next to me. We waited in silence. A few minutes later, the door opened and my father walked in. He was followed by a slick-looking lawyer in an expensive suit. My father wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the wall, his jaw tight with anger. He looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of his patriarchal authority. He was just a man in a room, a man who had been caught. His lawyer, a man named Mr. Jennings, oozed a false charm. "Mr. Harris, Miss Thompson," he said, smiling broadly as he shook our hands. "Thank you for meeting with us. I'm confident we can resolve this little misunderstanding amicably." Mr. Harris did not return the smile. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Jennings," he said, his voice cold. "There is a clear breach of contract and a blatant case of fraud." The meeting had begun. Mr. Jennings launched into a long, rambling speech about the importance of family and how these matters are best settled privately. He talked about my father's love for me, his desire to help me succeed. He painted my father as a benevolent patriarch who had simply made a small accounting error. I listened in silence, my anger a low hum beneath the surface. An accounting error? He had systematically drained the company for years. Finally, Mr. Jennings got to his offer. "My client, in the spirit of reconciliation, is prepared to repay your initial $20,000 investment in full," he said, as if he were bestowing a great gift. "He will also add 10% interest for your troubles, a total of $22,000. In exchange, you will sign a release, and this whole unfortunate matter will be behind us." I looked at my father. He was finally looking at me, his eyes pleading. He thought this would be enough. He thought he could buy my silence, buy my forgiveness, for a measly $2,000.
He still didn't get it.
He still didn't see me. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Mr. Jennings's smile faltered.
"I'm sorry."
"The offer is not accepted," I said, turning my gaze to my father. You seem to be under the impression that this is about the $20,000. It's not. It's about the contract you signed. The contract you broke. Mr. Harris slid a file across the table. This is a copy of the lawsuit we will be filing on Monday morning, he said. It details every unauthorized withdrawal, every fraudulent transfer. It includes copies of the bank statements, the invoices from your daughter's gala, and a full accounting of the rental income you have misappropriated over the past 3 years. It's a very strong case. We will win. And when we do, the court will not only compel the sale of your shares in the LLC, but it will also likely open a criminal investigation into your activities. Embezzlement is a serious charge, Mark. My father's face went pale. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking old and frail. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. This is outrageous, Mr. Jennings blustered, trying to regain control. You are trying to threaten my client. I am stating facts, Mr. Harris replied calmly. Your client has 2 options. He can face me in court, where his financial misdeeds will become a matter of public record. Or he can sign this document. He slid another piece of paper across the table. It was a transfer of ownership agreement. Sign this, he said, and you transfer your shares in the LLC to my client for the agreed-upon price of $1,000. She gets the building, and you get to walk away from this without facing a lawsuit and a potential criminal investigation. The choice is yours, but you will make it today. The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second marking the slow, agonizing dismantling of my father's world. He stared at the paper, his hands trembling. He looked at his lawyer, who offered him no help, no way out. Then, finally, he looked at me. His eyes were filled with a toxic mix of hatred and disbelief. He could not comprehend that I, his quiet, compliant daughter, had done this to him. You would do this to your own father? He whispered, his voice cracking. I met his gaze without flinching. The moment felt surreal. My heart is pounding in my chest. This is it. The point of no return. You did this to yourself, I said, my voice steady. You lied to me. You stole from me. And then you tried to throw me out of my home when I wouldn't pay for your mistakes. You stopped being my father when you decided I was nothing more than a bank account you could plunder. This isn't personal anymore. This is business. The word business seemed to break him. He slumped in his chair, a defeated man. He knew he had no choice. The evidence was overwhelming. The threat of public humiliation and legal consequences was too great. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He signed his name on the line. Just like that, it was over. The building was mine. The LLC was mine. My future was mine again. He stood up, not looking at me, and walked out of the room. Mr. Jennings gathered his papers and followed him, muttering something about appealing, but his words lacked any conviction. When they were gone, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I felt a strange mix of emotions, triumph, relief, and a deep, aching sadness for the family I had lost, or perhaps the family I had never really had. Mr. Harris patted my shoulder. You are very strong in there, he said. You should be proud of yourself. I was. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be their doormat. I had taken back the power they had held over me for so long. As I left the office and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I felt a sense of freedom I had never known. The weight of my family's expectations and disappointments was gone. I was on my own, truly on my own, and it was a terrifying and exhilarating feeling. I had won the battle, but I knew the war was not over. The fallout was yet to come. But whatever they threw me next, I knew I could handle it. I was no longer the quiet, sensible daughter. I was the owner, and they were the ones in debt. The aftermath was both as messy and as liberating as I had expected. The first wave came from my mother. She called me that evening, her voice a hysterical torrent of accusations and pleas. How could you do this, Olivia? She sobbed into the phone. How could you be so cruel? Your father is a broken man. You've destroyed him. You've destroyed this family. I listened, letting her vent her fury and her grief. I did not try to defend myself. I did not try to reason with her. There was no point. She was not interested in the truth. She was only interested in her narrative, the one where I was the villain, and they were the innocent victims. He built that business, she cried. He worked so hard, and you just took it from him? No, I said, my voice calm and even. I built my cafe. He used my dream to steal from me. He broke the law, and he broke our trust. What I did today was a consequence of his actions, not mine. But we're your family, she insisted, the familiar refrain that had been used to justify so much dysfunction. A family doesn't give their child an ultimatum to pay their debts or become homeless, I replied. You made your choice a long time ago, Mom. You chose Chloe. You chose the parties and the image and the lies. I am just finally making my own choice. She had no answer to that. She just continued to cry, a wounded, helpless sound. I felt a flicker of pity for her, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of her cold, hard face at the dining room table. She was not a victim. She was an enabler. She had stood by and watched as my father plundered my savings, and she had been more than willing to reap the benefits. I have to go, I said, my patience wearing thin. I have a business to run. I hung up before she could reply. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt significant. I was no longer willing to be a captive audience for her emotional manipulations. The second wave came from Chloe. A few days later, she showed up at my cafe. She stormed in during the lunchtime rush, her face a mask of righteous indignation. My employees froze, and the cheerful chatter of my customers died down. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice loud and demanding. I'm busy, Chloe, I said, not looking up from the espresso machine. I don't care, she said, marching behind the counter. You're going to listen to me. I turned off the machine and faced her, my arms crossed. You have 60 seconds. You are a horrible person, she spat, her eyes blazing with anger. You've ruined everything. Dad is a mess. Mom can't stop crying. They might lose the house because of you. They might lose the house because they spent $50,000 on a party for you. I corrected her. A party you didn't need, and they couldn't afford. It was an investment in my career, she shrieked. Something you wouldn't understand, with your sad little coffee shop. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. My sad little coffee shop? Chloe, this sad little coffee shop is now a profitable business that I own outright. And as of last Friday, I also own the building it's in. This business is going to pay my bills and secure my future. What is your career going to do for you? Who is going to fund your next party now that my bank account is closed? The color drained from her face. She had never considered the practical implications of my actions on her own life. She had only seen it as a betrayal of the family, not as the turning off of her personal cash spigot. That money was for the family, she whispered, her bravado crumbling. No, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense level. It was my money.
And you all stole it.
Now get out of my cafe. You're upsetting my customers. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She was so used to getting her way, so used to being the center of attention, that she didn't know how to react to being so thoroughly dismissed. She finally turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The cafe was silent for a moment, and then one of my regular customers, an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, started to applaud. Soon the whole cafe joined in. I felt a blush creep up my neck, but I also felt a surge of pride. This was my place. These were my people, and I had protected it. The final, and most surprising, wave of fallout came from my Aunt Sarah, my father's older sister. She called me a week after the meeting. I was hesitant to answer, expecting another lecture, but her tone was different. Olivia, she said, her voice warm and kind. I heard what happened. I just wanted to call and say, I'm proud of you. I was so stunned, I couldn't speak. Your father, she continued with a sigh, has always been this way, reckless with money, always looking for the easy way out. And your mother has always let him get away with it. I've watched them do this your whole life. I've watched them take advantage of your good nature. I'm just so glad you finally stood up for yourself." Tears pricked at my eyes. To hear someone in my family validate my feelings, to acknowledge the truth of my experience, was a profound relief. "I was so worried," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was being a monster." "You were being a survivor," she corrected me gently. "They left you no choice. Don't ever let them make you feel guilty for that. You've broken a cycle, Olivia. And that's a brave thing to do." We talked for over an hour. She told me stories about my father's past financial disasters, about the times he had borrowed money from her and never paid it back. It was a sad, sordid history of entitlement and irresponsibility. And it made me realize that what had happened to me was not personal. It was just my turn. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my new reality. I was a property owner. The first of the month came, and for the first time, I didn't have to write a rent check. Instead, I transferred the money from my business account to my personal savings. It was a powerful feeling. I hired a property management company to handle the other 2 small office spaces in the building, and soon I had a steady stream of passive income. I used the extra money to invest back into my cafe. I bought a new, state-of-the-art espresso machine. I gave my employees a raise. I expanded the menu. The business thrived. I was happy. I was free. Meanwhile, my family's world was collapsing. Just as Chloe had feared, they were forced to sell their house. The proceeds went to pay off the massive credit card debt they had accumulated, not just from the gala, but from years of living beyond their means. They moved into a small, cramped apartment in a less desirable part of town. The limousines and custom gowns were a distant memory. My father, stripped of his business and his home, fell into a deep depression. My mother had to get a job for the first time in 30 years, working as a cashier at a grocery store. Chloe's event planning career never materialized. Without her parents' money to fund her projects and impress her friends, she was just another aspiring influencer with no actual influence. She ended up moving back in with them, all 3 of them crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment, their bitterness and resentment a toxic cloud hanging over them. I did not gloat. I did not visit them. I simply cut them out of my life. I blocked their numbers. I unfriended them on social media. I created a wall of silence between us, a boundary they could not cross. One day, about a year later, my mother showed up at the cafe. She looked older, tired. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap, worn-out coat. She stood by the door, looking hesitant, as if she were afraid to come in. I walked over to her. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice not unkind, but not welcoming either. "I just wanted to see you," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "I miss you, Olivia." "You miss my money," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. She flinched, but she didn't deny it. "We're struggling," she admitted in a small voice. "Your father's health is not good. Chloe can't find a job. We could use some help." I looked at her, at the woman who had chosen a party over her own daughter's security. I saw the desperation in her eyes, the lifetime of poor choices that had led her to this moment. And I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a vast, empty space where my love for her used to be. "No," I said simply. "But we're your family," she whispered, the last, desperate plea of a manipulator who had run out of tricks. "My family is here," I said, gesturing to the bustling cafe around me. "My employees, who I treat with respect. My customers, who I value. The life I built for myself, with my own 2 hands. You are not my family. You are the people who tried to tear it all down. And you failed." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing by the door. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew what I would see. A ghost from a past I had finally escaped. They had given me an ultimatum, thinking it would break me. But instead, it had set me free. They had wanted me to pay their debts. Instead, I had bought my own future. They had taught me a valuable lesson, the most important one of my life. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the people who claim to love you the most. They had wanted me to get out. So I got out. And I took my investment, my business, and my self-respect with me. Now I owned it all, and they were the ones left owing. And that was a debt they would be paying for the rest of their lives.